What is up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Meaning of Podcast. This is the podcast where we talk about your favorite filmmakers on a much deeper level. My name is Ace. This is RB3, and this episode we're going to be talking about one of the hottest filmmakers. I always say that, one of the hottest filmmakers working in Hollywood today, but he really is. It's Mr. Edgar Wright himself. Master of comedy, super funny guy, another British filmmaker, like we did Matthew Vaughn last week, and now we're doing Edgar Wright. But this is a guy who pretty much every single one of his movies are just regarded as just comedic genius and just a really, really freaking good movie. So I'm excited to get into this episode. And yeah, but before we do that, we're going to check out some comments for last week. And last week, like I said before, we did Matthew Vaughn. And we want to incorporate you guys as much as we can. So make sure you guys, once again, leave us comments. Make sure you guys check out the episode before you leave the comments. I mean, you can leave the comments before either too, but we like incorporating you guys afterwards because we want to hear your thoughts on the conversation. We want to hear what you guys think. We want to hear whether you agree with us or whether you don't agree with us and why that is. So let's start out with some comments from Schmoville.
Yeah.
Because Schmoville is where we're going to post a lot of this stuff, guys. Dominic Reezy says, this guy has taken the world by storm this decade. I don't know how he does it, but prior to Golden Circle, every time this guy made a movie, it was absolute fire. Yeah, prior to Golden Circle.
Yes,
I like that.
yeah, exactly.
What are your thoughts on that, man?
No, I agree. I mean, all of his movies have been really highly regarded. We're talking about Edgar Wright this week. Obviously, Matthew Vaughn last week. They're both kind of cut from the same cloth. You know what I mean? Kind of a lot of style, a lot of tricky camera moves, editing. You know, they use all the tricks in the book. And I agree. Like all of the films that Matthew Vaughn had done pre Golden Circle were great. Post Golden Circle, you know, it's not looking too good. I mean, it's only one misstep, but it's a bad misstep in my
See, this is my thing, guys. So last week, I like reading your guys' comments, and I like really participating with you guys. I got a few comments that I just didn't feel like they gave, not necessarily that they gave Matthew Vaughn a chance, but that they gave us a chance. Like, for example, Blake Campbell says, Layer Cake is his only good one, the rest are schlock. Honestly, that's not true. If you listen to the rest of the podcast, you'll see how films like First Class and films like Kick-Ass and films like others like that are deeper than you may think. And that's kind of the point of this podcast, guys. So the point of this podcast isn't necessarily, we're not always going to talk about filmmakers like Spielberg or like Kubrick or like those kind of filmmakers who clearly have a specific mind and a specific vision, or even a Nolan, who have like a specific thing they're going for, and they're very like on the surface with it. What we want to do is we want to talk about filmmakers who you may not think have things to say as well, like a Matthew Vaughn, who you may think is just schlock or just action comedy, but he actually surprisingly has a lot to say in his films. So what I say to you guys is give us a shot. Let us explain to you why we feel like Matthew Vaughn is actually worth talking about.
Yeah, and I mean, there's some degree of truth to what he's saying in terms of.
Of course, yeah, I'm not disagreeing. Everyone has their opinion. What I'm trying to say is that I do feel like Matthew Vaughn has a little bit more to say than what most people think.
Right. But, I mean, to the extent of Layer Cake, I mean, yeah, that is his most grounded film. Is definitely the one that you see, you know, a more grounded, more serious type of vibe. And all the rest of them are a little silly and a little goofy, but they do have something under the surface. I have one comment from Matthew Chinchi, who writes, and I was on his podcast, so listen to that. He writes, yes, Matthew Vaughn is one of my favorite directors, with my favorite of his being Kingsman. Not only does it combine great action characters and comedies, it's a blockbuster that really has something smart to say about class structure and society and overcoming circumstances you're born. It's a hell of a time, a great parody of the Bond films, and just overall, in my eyes, a near perfect movie. Yeah, I mean, and we talked about Kingsman a little bit. I mean, we're both not really like original Kingsman like fanboys either.
No.
That one didn't hit as hard for me as most of his other films, but I still enjoyed it. I think it's a good movie. And we definitely did bring up a lot of the class structure stuff, and that's a consistent theme in this movie. So
absolutely, yeah. No, that's appreciate the comment, Matthew. A few more from YouTube, because we're also reading YouTube comments. Fingers crossed that they're always going to be okay. Aaron Brooks says, really loving every episode. Kick-Ass and First Class are amongst my favorite of the last 20 years. That's a
Yeah,
That's impressive, man.
Both great superhero movies.
That's very true. And there's Gunslinger 199 says, I haven't seen such a deep observation on Matthew Vaughn's films. Good job, guys. And yeah, Kingsman 2 blows.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, surprisingly, the vast majority of the comments and the vast majority of the feedback we're getting is people saying that they don't like Kingsman 2.
Yeah.
But that's not what we got on Twitter.
Yeah.
What we got on Twitter was a lot of people being like, hey, Kingsman 2 was amazing. You guys suck. And it's like, oh, all right.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
But yeah, for the most part, we got a lot of positive comments. Again, guys, when we talk about filmmakers like Matthew Vaughn, make sure you guys give us a shot and let us explain to you why we feel like he's worth talking about and why we feel his films have a little bit more to say than what the marketing or what the surface level of the film might be.
There's that one super long comment on Facebook though, right?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I wanted to bring it up. Cody Marr had a lot to say. She actually commented, I believe, on my Twitter as well. Mm-hmm. She just really felt that Matthew Vaughn. I'm not going to read the whole comment. You guys can if you want to. But she really went into depth about how Matthew Vaughn really kind of took the drug concept of the Appalachian and the West Virginia and the kind of southern Kentucky region, and he kind of didn't handle it with care. He Matthew Vaughn treated the drug epidemic that's happening in the South in a very nonchalant, almost like making fun of them kind of way, and she felt like that was very disrespectful to him, especially of him not actually being from there and being very much a foreigner to when it comes to Southern America and when it comes to that area as well. And yeah, I mean, she makes a great point. He didn't really, he has his interpretation of what America is, and he doesn't really handle it with care. He almost handles it with like jokes and making fun of us. And in the sense, I've never really, cared, but he doesn't really pay attention to a bigger, broader scope of the American landscape. I guess it's a very stereotypical American portrayal in all of his films.
Yeah, I mean, the imagery that he was going with to portray Americans is like we kind of mentioned in the last episode with the British spy movies. He's doing like the British aesthetic and whatnot. And in Kingsman 2, he's making like the American Western like the big thing and everything. We talked about that last episode, but long story short is like to me. He did handle that with care, and that was one of my biggest problems with the movie, and that's why I feel like I couldn't connect to it, because they would equate somebody who is like the president's like Secretary of State or whatever, assistant or whatever she is, doing like these drugs or whatever, and they're locking her away in a concentration camp basically.
And they made they made you know that it was weed.
Yeah.
She made it very specific. She didn't say any other kind of drug. She said weed.
That's what I was getting at. And then in the meantime, that's equated on the same level as like Eggsy's friend literally smoking crack.
Yeah.
And it's like what the heck? Like I don't know. To me it was a little shaky, and we talked about that last week.
We did, yeah. But I think what the main thing she was trying to say was the fact that area specifically that Matthew Vaughn was talking about does have a very big drug problem. So it's one of those things where it's like it's like throwing a hurricane in Puerto Rico in a movie. It's like, whoa, a little too close to home, a little too soon. Let's not. I'm trying to equivalate it as much as I can, but it's like that kind of thing where it's like, whoa, dude, we do have issues with this. Why are you making fun of this?
Yeah.
That kind of whole concept, especially him being British and not knowing about the area, kind of.
Yeah. But I mean, again, that's his kind of one misfire.
It is, and it's also Matthew Vaughn's MO. It's very much him.
Yeah.
Portraying America in the way he thinks America is in the most ridiculous kind of way.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I appreciate your comment, Cody. We always want to receive different opinions as well. Cool. Let's jump into Edgar Wright. Edgar Wright is, like I said before, a filmmaker clearly regarded as one of the best working today. He is a filmmaker who pretty much is known as a master of comedy and a master of like genre bending and genre parodying, if that's a word, and also a master of editing and fast movement and pacing and just a real. He's one of those guys where I was talking to my mom about Edgar Wright and that we were going to do an Edgar Wright episode, and she was like, "Who is this guy?" And I was like, "He's one of those guys that cinephiles. He's one of those guys that cinephiles and like people who love movies love him, like regardless of like his genre movies." people still love him. Like, it's one of those things where he's not like an Oscar filmmaker or like a Spielberg or something, but he's still a filmmaker that, ask your average super movie fan, your average cinephile, they're going to adore Edgar Wright because of his style, because of his genre bending, because of the way he is very wink with the genres he's in. He's very self-aware of what he's doing with each and every one of his films. Yeah, what are your opinions on Edgar Wright?
Yeah, I mean, I've been an Edgar Wright fanboy for a very long time. I think he's had some of, like, one of the best streaks, I think. He's only had, like, really 5 movies, but they've all been really well executed, really strong. Like you said, genre bending, which I always enjoy in a filmmaker. That's why I like people like Tarantino are some of my favorites, because they're able to mix and match genres and make something interesting and new out of it. And you definitely see that in Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, the whole Cornello trilogy in general is just really well done. And you kind of touched on editing, and that I think that's probably one of the key essential things that separate him from all other filmmakers. Like with Matthew Vaughn last week, we kind of talked about his use of the camera being what he exaggerates a lot, but with Edgar Wright, he does great work with editing, and unlike most filmmakers, he's conscious of editing while shooting. You know what I mean? So he'll set up a shot. He'll set up 2 different shots to act as a match cut from one scene to another scene, just to make the transition seamless. And he'll move the camera and manipulate the camera in a certain way that will make a transition seamless as well. So he does all of that ahead of time. He storyboards ahead of time, even down to those transitions from scene to scene. That all matters, and I think that's important. The attention to detail is next level on his films. So I think that's why he's so highly regarded in that sense. He pays close attention and minds every single aspect of the filmmaking to get a laugh or to get a joke, but while also creating these great emotionally centered protagonists to all have like issues and they're trying to overcome, and give them these really personal scenes in the mix of these extraordinary circumstances that they might be in. So
yeah, and again, it's one of those filmmakers that, if you're a fan of movies, and if you're a fan of movies, movies in general, you get to see a lot of movie tropes and a lot of things that always come up in genres. So essentially, the meaning of a genre film is basically like something that follows a certain formula or a certain system. So
right.
When you see him kind of poke fun at those formulaic movie genre
right.
systems, it's really freaking funny. Like, just rewatching his movies over the last week, I can't lie, it's hysterical how many things you're just like, yeah, that's very much a heist movie, or that's very much a Western or horror, and he flips it on its head and he pokes fun at it in a way that is just so, it really is genius in the sense of how he pokes fun at the genres and the typical things that come up in all these films. Yeah. So Edgar Wright is that guy who is really good at doing that, and I think people who enjoy movies and enjoy genre films can have a good laugh at it for sure.
Right. And speaking on genre, like there's 2 sides of the definition when you're talking about genre. There's the tropes that you were kind of mentioning, the story beats that we all become familiar with. And there's also the iconography, like the way a genre is supposed to look, the way a genre is supposed to have a tone and emotion, and the music that's supposed to go within that genre. And he definitely takes a lot of those aspects in these individual genres, the iconography of it, the look of it, and adapts them into each of his movies. So Hot Fuzz really looks like a police thriller, like an American police thriller that he's parodying. Shaun of the Dead really looks like a zombie apocalypse movie. Scott Pilgrim versus the World, even though it's like this light, fluffy comic book movie, it feels and it irks a lot of the coming of age iconography and the tropes as well. So again, that's one of the smartest ways to approach the genre that he's always been able to do.
Yeah, he's great, man. He's really freaking good at doing that. All right, let's jump onto his filmography. Obviously, he doesn't have too many films, but his first feature film came out in 1995. I believe it's called Fistful of Fingers. Now, Mr. Robert Butler III, have you seen this movie?
No, I haven't seen this movie.
I completely understand why, because I tried to find this movie as hard as I could, and I found it. and I saw it, but I just it's so funny how this is one of those films that it's just so tiny that it almost kind of doesn't count. It counts. I know a lot of Edgar Wright fans are screaming right now. It counts, but it's just one of those things that it's so small. I just wanted to hear if you saw it or not.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm definitely aware of it. I know it's supposed to be like a Western parody.
It's very much a Western parody.
Yeah, and I think that's really funny because all of his movies, almost kind of in a way, are individual parodies.
They really are, yeah.
Like different types of genres. You know what I mean? Like American genres in particular, whether that be the Western, and in that sense, or the American police drama in Hot Fuzz, because the way, if you look at like British police movies, is very different than the way American movies are structured. But he's specifically going at movies like Point Break and stuff. And then we'll talk about Shaun of the Dead, but that comes, I think it came around the same time or after the same time, the Dawn of the Dead remake with Zack Snyder.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
no,
and it takes a lot of aesthetics. So we'll jump into that
for sure. Yeah. So let me tell you guys a little bit about Fistful of Fingers. It's essentially just one giant Western parody. So the character has very much that Eastwood vibes. It has like he comes into town and everyone at the town is like trying to find a way out of there. They're all staring at him, and then when he like tries to talk to them, they all kind of disappear. He goes to the bar and asks the bartender for something, and the bartender is always following the same tropes and is very robotic in his ways. He tries to find the bad guy, and the bad guy is like this guy on a wanted poster. It's just super like. When they ride a horse, they're riding like a fake horse, and they're making horse noises throughout it. So he's riding like a toy. It's super low budget. Like I'm saying like so low budget to the point that you're just like, damn, this is really low budget. But the horse that they ride is like a little toy horse, and they're just making horse noises. Like it's really like super over the top in that sense of like how much they're making fun of a parody for these kind of movies. But if you're a Western fan, you'll obviously enjoy this movie, and if you just know the Western tropes, you'll get a good laugh out of it. But this is kind of the system that he takes this same system from A Fistful of Fingers and he amplifies it to the rest of his films, and it's really it really is a precursor to the Edgar Wright style that you'll see come up in all the other ones. And I'd say check it out. It's really short, so I would say if you can find it, check it out. But yeah, for sure, it's one of those movies that kind of started the whole Edgar Wright parody phase. But let's move over to his next film, which I believe is Shaun of the Dead.
All right, yeah.
And this one came out in 2004. And like you said before, this is one where it's coming out like Dawn of the Dead. It came out the same year as Dawn of the Dead, and it was coming out during that whole zombie apocalypse kind of rebrand of the movie world. And this one, man, I rewatched this movie last night, and I can't lie, it still holds up as absolutely hysterical. This is kind of like the whole like Simon Pegg coming into his own. This is Simon Pegg introducing himself to the world and introducing himself as obviously a comedic actor and as someone who's known to be super funny, but someone who can not just do comedy but do like really emotional scenes as well, because he actually has some pretty emotional scenes in this movie that actually showcases some good range in Simon Pegg's, acting and action comedy, man. Like he really is good at holding his own, and like the action scenes and defeating zombies and all that. He really shows a lot in this movie, and it's one of those movies that every detail matters in the movie. Every edit, every little second that Edgar Wright puts into this movie is an effort to make you laugh. And it works, man. It really does work. What do you think of this film?
Yeah, no, I love this movie as well. This is Edgar Wright's kind of like debut, like kind of jumping off point for the rest of the world to kind of see what he's capable of as a director. He uses a lot of, really subversive tropes and the zombie genre, like the whole idea of like hiding out and barricading. He kind of like breaks a lot of those rules and makes like the characters go on a road, makes them have like a journey. He kind of forces, even though like the news is like, oh, stay in the house, but they insist on going to a pub. And I think that's really fascinating, how he's able to take like the tropes and ideas of this genre, and like you were kind of talking about Dawn of the Dead, the Zack Snyder remake came out during that time. 28 Days Later was another one. Danny Boyle that came out around that time. So there was like a new energy of zombie apocalypse movies, but the cultural impact of this movie itself spawned a whole like subgenre of like zombie comedies. You know, Zombieland is probably like the prime example of something that kind of takes direct influence from Shaun of the Dead, and I think that with this movie, he's good at making the laughs hit really hard. There isn't like a single joke that misses, really. But there is enough character moments in there as well. Like you kind of talking about the emotional scenes when he has to be forced to like kill his mother, who just became a zombie, or leave his stepfather, who he finally has like a real emotional connection with at the very end of his life. And I think that's some really powerful stuff that he's going for in this movie. And it's definitely, you know, a lot of people regard this as Edgar Wright's best film. A lot of people regard this as one of the top like horror comedies of all time and just one of the top comedies of all time. And I've even seen people who list like like their 100 greatest thing and put Shaun of the Dead really high up there, and you know that's coming from like respected lists from like Time Magazine or like Hollywood Reporter are all like ranking it this high. And I think that's what this movie resonates with a lot of people, because a lot of people can relate to this protagonist who's put in a situation where he has to be forced to become a leader, where he's put in a situation where he doesn't really understand why the world is becoming crazy, why there's so many zombies breaking out, and we never understand either. They never give an explanation for it, even to the point where we expect an explanation like on the TV news at the end, like he's actively like changing the channel away from it.
Yeah.
So again, it's really nice that we have a protagonist who's just as lost as we are, but at the same time we can relate because he goes through the plight of trying to impress his girlfriend while also trying to hold down his best friend and all that stuff. So
yeah, it's one of those movies that it kind of did. I don't think it started the horror comedy genre, but it reinvigorated it.
Yeah,
is what I would say.
Yeah.
Because now we get tons of horror comedies that people nowadays regard as great as well. Like there's Tucker Dale versus Evil.
Yeah, Cabin in the Woods.
Cabin in the Woods. There's so many now horror comedies that people love now. And Shaun of the Dead was kind of the one that reinvigorated that kind of genre for itself. And now the plot of the movie as well is something that sticks out to me because it's a plot of the movie that basically it's a guy who's getting close to the 30-year-old age, and he's very much like down on his luck. He has a girlfriend, but his girlfriend isn't really happy with him. He has a job, but it's very much a go through the motions kind of job, not a satisfying job. And now when the world, goes to crap and when the world ends, he kind of comes into his own. He becomes a great leader, and he's really good and at leading and at fighting off zombies. He's a good zombie killer. And it's like one of those things where it takes the world coming to an end for him to come into his own kind of thing situation, where I know there's a scene where the guy with the glasses is talking about David.
Yeah.
The guy with the glasses, David, is talking about, there should be a leader in here and it should be me. And then in comes in Shaun, and he's like, you grab the door, you close this, you grab me and grab the gun, and we'll do this. We'll take out the zombies. And he's really good at being that zombie apocalypse stereotypical leader that we see in all these films. And yeah, it's an interesting theme that comes into full circle with this movie. And also like little details that he puts in, like one of my favorite moments, and it's one of the beginning of the movie, is where Shaun wakes up and he sits down and Ed is playing video games, Nick Frost's character.
Right.
And he says, player 2 has entered the game. And immediately his friend's like, don't you have work? Player 2 has exited the game. Right. And he like walks up. Like that to me is just, those little details are so funny. And also the kind of a precursor to Baby Driver with that scene in the Winchester in the bar.
Yeah.
Where they're beating up the zombie in rhythm to a beat, where it's like the music's playing and they're beating them up on beat in a musical kind of way. And that scene makes me laugh so hard, dude. And I can't lie, when the camera cuts to his mom and his friend and they're like watching him beat a zombie in a musical way, and they're all watching it and they're all like, yeah, get it, as if they're watching a musical where they're just like snapping and just kind of like, yeah, kill that zombie. But they're watching it like a show.
Yeah.
It's so funny. And it is kind of that thing that he used in Baby Driver, where it's like, this is something that comes up in all of Edgar Wright's films as far as the style of incorporating music. Into action and into action and in a funny way. It's like three different things into one, and it's so freaking well done.
Right. And he's you know, in terms of the use of like audio and music too, he has like these really interesting. We'll talk about it more when we get to like Scott Pilgrim and stuff. But whenever there's like an audio transition, or whenever there's a transition in general, he uses like an audio effect or a sound effect to like really enhance like the way it, like the smooth out the cuts. And we see that a little bit in Shaun of the Dead, but I think that comes into play with like the whole musicality of that scene, because he really likes to incorporate the sound and the music and that piece of formal aspect to what he's doing, and incorporate that into his films. So again, this movie is really great. You know, all of the performances are top notch, and having the script written by Simon Pegg and Nick Frost, who he collaborates again 2 other times with, you know, kind of spawns like this like fan made trilogy, like the Cronello trilogy, with those 3 guys, and you know, it's a very fun upbeat movie that, you know, has kind of a heartbreaking ending, but that's also satisfying as well.
Yeah, and it's crazy. We're watching this movie again. It's crazy how the ending. This is one of those zombie apocalypses where they kind of everything kind of comes full circle. Like we fight off all the zombies, we kill them all, and that's it. Now all the rest of the zombies are just used for toys, or play
or
games,
like work,
or entertainment. But it's not. It's not the end of the world. Like we literally found a way to fight off all the zombies. Everyone else who was not bitten is fine, and we're all back to living our old boring lives, kind of whole thing where he's sitting on the couch again, and it's all repeated once again. And it's one of those things where it's like, huh. Whereas like most zombie movies are like, this is how it's going to be forever, and we're going to die, and the world's going to burn. And this is one where just like back to the same old boring life. Sure, wasn't that weird when we had zombies in the world? I guess that was kind of weird. And it's like everything's fine now. I kind of thought that was fun. I thought that was cool how it's different.
You know what's funny? And they have that whole thing at the end where like they're putting like the zombies to work or whatever. Like I kind of feel like that's Edgar Wright's way of saying like all of this shit is just like meaningless, you know? Like all of like the laboring jobs is just like a zombie could do it, you know what I mean?
Oh, okay.
I think that's like a nice little funny like poke at that, you know what I mean? Like he had like zombies in like prison suits or whatever, like I don't know. It's just the way he's kind of commenting on that is like all of it's kind of brainless, like, you know, kind of like schlock. And until you're put in like the face of a situation, like Simon Pegg's character was, where he has to be forced into a leadership position. That's only when like he's able to thrive. So.
Yeah. Any last words on Shaun of the Dead before we move on?
Yeah, no. I mean, it's definitely one of my favorite Edgar Wright films. It has a sharp, poignant. Poking at what is doing, but also allows for enough emotional beats and enough love for his characters.
And that's tough to do.
Yeah, it is. Especially with something that is so riffing on a genre that's like borderline spoof movie. You know, and we'll talk about Hot Fuzz, where I think is like moving into the territory of spoofs. But this, you know, with Shaun of the Dead is more of just like a straight up comedy, very influenced by like Sam Raimi's you know, Evil Dead stuff. Yeah.
We'll get into Sam Raimi one of these days.
One of these days, yeah. You know, he carries a lot of big influences like that from Sam Raimi, from Tarantino, with the music and stuff. And I think it works really effectively, and I really enjoy this movie a lot. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this to me is one of those movies that, obviously, I said before, holds up still today. And it's one of those movies that I find hysterical. I like that every detail in this movie. Like, I didn't talk about the TV, where it's changing the TV, and it's talking what's going on in the world as it's changing the channel. How it's like he's watching the sports, and they're attacking every single person, and they change the channel to like National Geographic, eating each other alive. And you're like, oh my God, that's so good.
Yeah.
Like, every detail is so well done. The editing is top notch. The scene where he's like, all right, this is our plan. We're going to go to my mom's house. Then we're going to kill my mom's boyfriend. And then we're going to get in the car and come back here. He's like, wait a minute. What about the Winchester and your girlfriend? He's like, all right. New plan. We're going to go to my mom's house. And they show it. And that to me is like Edgar Wright at his finest. And that it's so well done. And it's super funny.
The use of montage in this movie is like off the chain. Like with that whole sequence with... you know, the new sequence, you know, is kind of like a mini montage within like the story beats. So the way he uses all of that is to further the story while also giving like a little insight into what his character like is thinking, right?
Absolutely.
Like, so I think that's really interesting.
Yeah. All right. Speaking of that too, he does that a lot in his next movie, which is Hot Fuzz.
Hot Fuzz, yeah.
Now, Hot Fuzz came out in
2007.
2007.
Yeah.
And this is one that you can still find on Netflix, which I find kind of fun because I saw it on Netflix. I didn't see this one when it came out, to be fully honest. But I saw this one a while back when it was on Netflix or when it came out on Netflix. And yeah, this is another one with Simon Pegg and Nick Frost being the leads of the movie. And this is one, it's another parody film of a buddy cop comedy, as well as like the typical cop movie of America.
Right.
And it kind of has a little bit of a Western as well. Western parody. Yeah, there's some Western tropes in there that he uses and kind of makes fun of it as well.
Yeah.
But this is about kind of like that straight-laced, super by-the-numbers cop who moves into a town or who's like pushed into a town to try to whip everyone into shape and kind of redo that thing. But this is another one for me that is just, I think it's underappreciated. I think it's so funny, and I think it's absolutely hysterical. And if you just see this film, you can kind of get his vibe. You can see the Edgar Wright formula at play, and you could see a lot of his comedic editing and his comedic timing, and also the way he incorporates other people and just side characters and because he has a lot of townspeople in this movie,
right? And
they all have like a really funny moment. It's just, it's a really freaking good movie that I feel like a lot of people kind of they think of Shaun of the Dead, they think of Baby Driver and Scott Pilgrim, but this one kind of gets forgotten a little bit. What do you think of Hot Fuzz?
Yeah, Hot Fuzz is hilarious. I think this is probably, I mean, I kind of alluded to it before, but I think this is more of a straight-on, full-on spoof movie.
Okay.
You know, and I think the reason being is because it actually shows you, like, what it's trying to parody, what it's going for. You know, obviously, like, the Bad Boy 2s, the Point Breaks, you know, the Lethal Weapons, the Die Hards, or the Die Hard 3. By the way, we should do a John McTiernan episode one day. That'd be great.
Let's do it.
Yeah. But yeah, no, with Edgar Wright though, and with Hot Fuzz, you know, he's very much making fun of the way American cop movies go. Because if you watch British cop movies, they're a little different. They're a little slower. You know, in the UK, or at least in Britain, to my understanding, the cops don't carry guns, so there isn't like a lot of big shootouts or whatever. You know, and this movie is very much like, oh, these are these uptight, studious British cops who, you know, obviously in that part of the country have not seen a lot of crime, a lot of criminalism and whatnot. They are so like unfamiliar with the idea of a murder that they literally keep thinking like, oh, these 4 people who all knew each other just so happened to die by accident, you know. And it's kind of, it's a funny commentary on like the incompetence that sometimes comes in like these cops. Maybe in real life and maybe just in the movies, but I think it's a full-on spoof of what we see in like the American buddy cop genre. So
absolutely, yeah. And this one to me is another one where he kind of has, Edgar Wright does some very similar things in all his movies when it comes to comedy, but he also does it with plot, I believe, as well. Specifically, he does this in Hot Fuzz, and he does it at World's End as well. And it's that, and even in Fistful of Fingers, he does that whole like townspeople seem nice, but there is something deeper going on, and they're kind of like in a cultish world where it's supposed to be like the townspeople who are a part of this cult who they feel like they need to clean up the city, and they feel like the only way to do that is to do it in their own hands, kind of thing. Similar, I mean, at World's End is obviously not exactly like that, but they also have that kind of whole like group of people coming together to stop the bad coming in kind of thing. And that's something that's in this movie as well, where it's the whole concept of like the bad guys is that friendly grandma, or like the friendly old man who always says hi to you in the morning or something like that, or the gardener or something like that.
Right.
And that's actually the bad guy, because they're the ones who are committing these murders in the name of something good, as they believe it to be good, which is something kind of interesting that he brings up in all his movies, as far as like, because the running theme in all of, we'll get into it at World's End, but a running theme in all of Edgar Wright's movies is the concept of a pub and of drinking. I don't know if you've noticed that.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah.
I mean, Shaun of the Dead takes place at a pub.
Yeah.
This one has some mentions to like drinking and
they
all
go
that
to a
stuff.
pub. Whenever they go to a pub, like that, they go to a pub and literally somebody ends up dying.
Yeah.
Like, every time they leave.
Exactly. And World's End is all about pubs, and it's the whole concept of like drinking, and does it lead to bad things and all that. And if you don't drink, why would you not drink? You're an idiot.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
And the World's End definitely hits.
The World's End obviously even more, but this one kind of touches on that a little bit too.
Yeah.
What do you think of that?
No, I definitely agree. I think that's what he's going for. Is like the whole idea of going to a pub is like a sort of like mention of camaraderie. You know, that's kind of the beginning of the relationship that we see between, you know, his character and
Nick Frost.
Nick Frost, and you know. But going back to more of like the techniques of the filmmaking, Hot Fuzz uses so many montages, so many like hypercuts. We kind of talked about the hip hop montage.
This is like hip hop montage to the
times
extreme.
11. Yeah,
this is trap montage. This is some crazy ass freaking montage type thing.
Yeah,
this is twisted montage.
Right,
straight up spitting fast montage.
Right. You know, why does it take 7 cuts to pour a cup of coffee? You know, like that's really what he's going for. And again, that's a straight up parody of what we see in like a lot of American cop movies.
Yeah.
But it's just so well used and effective here. That whole scene in the beginning where he's like leaving London and going into the country, where they have like the real quick cuts from him going on a train with his like plan or whatever is so funny. And what's so smart about that is if you pay attention to like the eye lines that Simon Pegg is using, every time his eyes will move right, the cut will like go right, or like the motion of the next cut will like go towards the right or whatever, and stuff like that. So to me, it's one of the best uses, I think, of montage in all of his films.
It's incredible. Even the scene where he's traveling to going from London to like the small town or whatever, and it cuts to like the train, and the train's coming in, and it gets really loud, and then it cuts back in, and then he's sitting there with the plant. Like those scenes where he's traveling is really freaking cool, because you get to see kind of the minutia, or like the little day-to-day details that make that scenario even more important and even more effective. Right? Where it's like the whole concept of like going from one town to another, and it being very lonely and a very, very like boring kind of thing. And it's the day-to-day things that he does with those montages that he's incredible at. Edgar Wright is so good at that. Like probably the best at it, if anything. Yeah. He's just so good at it. He's not the creator of it, but he's one of those guys who took it and just like we said before, just went 100% with it, and it makes everything super fun and super funny, or just really effective in general.
And you know, and he's using that and telling like these little individual day-to-day moments, like I kind of alluded to the cup of coffee scenes, like the scenes where they're in the pub like getting their drinks or whatever. I mean, there's a lot of like fun little moments that are just over dramatized because of like these rampant cuts. You know, like that whole moment where they're bringing in Homeboy's cake, and then it's like, there's a fire in the building. What? And then it cuts to like him like reacting and like everything, and then it's just like a little birthday cake coming in. So there's a lot of great genuine moments in there. And again, I think that lends to the whole idea of like character misunderstanding. You know, his lead character doesn't have any idea why, you know, these people aren't acting according to procedure, why these people aren't investigating these crimes, these murders, and all of this stuff is happening right under their thumb, even to the point where like their main sergeant is like one of the cult leaders at the end that we find out. So
what do you think of the ending when he comes up in with all the guns and stuff, and he starts with that crazy
scenario?
Isn't that cool? And that's another Western vibe too. We get kind of a Western feel where it's like
he's literally riding a horse, like
riding a horse and getting ready to shoot some people up, and he's like that lone bandit kind of guy, and that to me, that scene's great. It's so freaking good.
And it's funny, and you know, a lot of films have done that whole thing where like they're loading the gun, checking it, getting ready to head out, and there's a lot of films that do it seriously, and this one was doing it as just a straight joke, but it executes it like almost better than a lot of other scenes where like it's a lot more effective.
That's such a good point, because isn't it crazy how this scene's about Simon Pegg, and he's coming into this town, and you see Simon Pegg, like in real life, you see Simon Pegg, and you're just like, this is some nerdy, normal British guy. But in this movie, Simon Pegg's a badass.
Oh, yeah.
He's straight up the Rock in this movie.
He's doing like backflips and shit.
Oh, my God. One of my favorite scenes in this movie is the fence scene. This is a running theme that Edgar Wright has in all his films, is people trying to get over fences. And my favorite one is in Hot Fuzz, where he's doing backflips over. He's like, let's go. He's like, yeah. And he's like doing flips and stuff. Oh my God. I legit die laughing every time, dude. Because to me, that's just one of those little details, and it's just so funny and so over the top that if you're a badass, you're not gonna jump over a fence in a normal way. You're gonna jump over it like Spider-Man or something.
Yeah,
it's
they
so
had
funny.
they had that in Shaun of the Dead too, right? Like when he tried to get to his mother, so he like hops on a trampoline and like front flips over a fence or whatever.
Yeah.
He's so good at that, and that's again like one of the running jokes in his films. So
And it's in pretty much all his films.
Yeah.
I think that's hysterical for sure. And it's those little details that make it really fun. And I appreciated that Simon Pegg is like that kind of stereotypical badass in this film, even though he doesn't look like it. But yeah, this movie is absolutely hysterical, and it gets me every time. And it's fun to just sit back and watch it and appreciate all the effort that Edgar Wright puts into it just for comedic purposes and all that.
Yeah, and it's funny. I had watched a thing like he did a podcast, I guess, with Quentin Tarantino and himself, just kind of talking, and he was talking about Hot Fuzz, and he was like, "Oh, the reason why we can't make a sequel to this movie is because of how much of a journey the protagonist goes on all the way towards the end, right? Like he starts off." As like the studious kind of London cop trying to play everything by procedure and everything like that. But at the end, he's like wearing the black glasses, the bulletproof vest, like he's ready to kill some mofos, right? Like, so I think that's really funny, and I think it's on a larger context. I think it's a lot of commentary on like the incompetence that comes sometimes in these like police departments, how they're not taking seriously a lot of the investigations that go on, and how because it's a small town, a lot of stuff just gets swept under the rug.
Very true.
Where in reality, there's something a lot more sinister and darker going on, and I think that's really where Hot Fuzz like stretches and uses imagination to take that to like the next level. So
absolutely, yeah. Let's move on to his next film, which I believe is probably his most popular film still.
Yeah.
And that's Scott Pilgrim versus the World, man.
Mm-hmm.
This is his first non-British film, which I believe is kind of interesting as well.
Like
this is his first
feature without
British actors.
Yeah,
using American actors.
And with we were going through the Shaun of the Dead and the Hot Fuzz. This is the first big one without Simon Pegg and Nick Frost.
That's a very good point. Yeah, it is absolutely. Obviously, they'll come back for At World's End, but for this one, it's Michael Cera coming into his own, and it's Michael Cera kind of playing Michael Cera.
Yeah.
But this one came out in 2010, and I believe it premiered at Comic-Con, or at least it had a premiere at Comic-Con.
It did.
And this is based off the comic book Scott Pilgrim versus the World, and apparently it's a pretty faithful adaptation of that comic book.
I've read the comic book.
Oh, you have? Okay.
I read it before I saw the movie, actually.
And I know you love this movie quite a bit. I enjoy it quite a bit because I feel like it's an extremely energetic movie. I think energetic's like the perfect word to describe it, because it's full fist pumping kind of movie as far as like how fast and how furious it's going, and it's legitimately some of the best uses of comedy and of comic book references and of like just comic book things that come into movies, and literally using them in a movie to make you laugh. And it really does make you laugh, because this movie is absolutely hysterical. What do you think about this movie, and why is it your favorite, probably?
To me, it's definitely my favorite of his. I remember seeing this opening weekend when it came out, 2010. I believe it was like June or whatever.
You were like 5?
I was like, I think I was like my first year of high school or something like that.
Got it.
Or it might have been like middle
damn,
school or
dude.
something. Yeah, it was crazy.
Damn. I'm like in college already.
It's such a funny, and I remember going and seeing it like opening weekend. There was like nobody in the theater.
Yeah.
And it really underperformed box office
really
wise.
did.
But to me, this was just a genuinely like wall to wall, like almost a perfect movie to me. You know what I mean? The whole and again, like I said, I had read the comic book before, so I knew like a lot of what they're trying to go for, tonically, and like we're talking about faithful adaptations. It goes faithful all the way down to like adding comic book text in the movie, like having actual graphics that pop up. Like as the characters are talking, that are ripped straight from the pages, you know what I mean? And I think the book is like a 7-run series, and so they condense all of it into one movie. But it's just so it's funny, it's light, it's energetic. We kind of talk about how Hot Fuzz is like his police buddy movie. Shaun of the Dead is like his horror apocalypse zombie movie. This is like his play on coming of age stories, and we never really see him work with a lot of teens really in his films. But these are like all young people who are all misguided, misdirected, even to the point where like our main Michael Cera character is dating a high school girl, you know, and it's just to me. The use of music in this movie as well. The soundtrack is impeccable.
Oh, it's so good.
And I think, you know, with Baby Driver was the big one that kind of used a lot of music and incorporated that. But I think Scott Pilgrim was really like a big example of that as well. Where music is actually part of the plot. You know, he's in a rock band who's trying to find some success. And one of the battles with one of the evil exes is literally a giant...
is it the bass battle?
Yeah, bass battle. Yeah,
bass battle's great.
Yeah, so it's just and a lot of funny stuff in there. Chris Evans coming in as the movie star.
Oh my gosh, Chris Evans.
Yeah, it's just it's so many great elements. To me, this is my favorite by far of any Edgar Wright movie. To me, so yeah,
we're good. All right,
we're
cool.
good.
Yeah, for me, this one is one that obviously holds up still today. It's another one too that it's kind of parodying comic books as well, and it's kind of making it very self-aware. It's probably the most self-aware movie I've ever seen, where it knows what it's doing and it knows what it's telling you, and I just find it absolutely hysterical because there's every little moment, every little detail is really well done. To the moment where he's playing the band, and in the band he's you could see the music waves. You can see it's very much visual, right? It's a very visual comedic movie where you see everything kind of happening and you see these moments coming into play. Use of lighting as well, where it's like if it gets dramatic, it literally does dramatic lighting and stuff like that. Or if there's like there's so many freaking good moments in this movie. But yeah, obviously the plot is mainly around him defeating the 7 evil exes,
right?
And him trying to win the love of this girl, Ramona Flowers, who's played by Mary Elizabeth Winstead. And this is another one where the cast is surprisingly pretty fire, man. Like, obviously Michael Cera's in there, but you got Brie Larson in there.
And Brie Larson, yeah.
You got Brandon Routh,
This
Chris
was
Evans.
a big breakout for a lot of these actors.
Yeah,
you know,
it was.
Mary Winston wasn't really in much before this movie. Neither was... Brie Larson.
Anna Kendrick's in there.
Kendrick, yeah. Michael Cera, this is kind of like his motion picture kind of debut coming out of stuff like, you know, all the Superbad and stuff like that. Obviously broke him out, but this was like another big piece of that puzzle. And it's not even to mention how great the... like you're kind of talking about like the graphics and the visual effects.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah, the way they're able to use, like, again, this is coming straight from the comic book pages, like the little bars that are coming up, the little like life, you know, a lot of people are saying this is like the first great video game movie, right? Like because it emulates a lot of the video game aesthetic, you know what I mean?
That's very true.
And the use of like the editing in this movie, right? I mean, they flow so seamlessly in between scenes by doing like these little tricks, like having like a shot on Knives, who is Scott's girlfriend, and then cutting to a shot of Scott, but then cutting back to her shot, but they're in a totally different location.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Or going as far as like when they need to communicate something from night to day, they'll have the shot of the homie's homeboy's roommate sleeping on the bed, and then like at night, but then like switching the lighting immediately, and it's like during the daytime. And it's like, you know, you automatically get that sense. So many like really cool elements in this film.
It's crazy, and it works so well because the script also is extremely well written as far as how funny it is as well, and extremely well written as far as like little moments and little details that always come into play. There's so many memorable lines in this movie and little cameos and little moments. Like I remember when he's doing the bass battle against Brandon Routh, who, funny enough, seeing him come from Superman Returns into this movie is really funny. It works. It makes it even funny. You're seeing people like Chris Evans,
who was coming off of Fantastic Four.
Yeah,
this is pre Captain America,
and seeing someone like a Brandon Routh, who you're like, isn't that the guy from Superman Returns? Right, and then you see him in this kind of weird, funny role. It works extremely well, and I love little moments where like the vegan police comes
Yes,
in, and it's Thomas
yes.
Jane.
Yeah, yeah.
He's like, "You've broken the vegan police rules, dude." He's like, "No, man, I swear I haven't." Like simple stuff like that. Or when he fights the first ex-boyfriend, and he has it's like this Bollywood guy.
Oh yeah,
and he's having a
yeah.
Bollywood battle with him, and then he has like his hipster demon girlfriends. I think he calls them. Little moments like that, or the moment where Brandon Routh punches knives, and then young Neil comes over and he's like, he punched his highlights from her hair. He punched the highlights out of her hair, like stuff like that. Or when Scott Pilgrim's like, oh yeah, me and Kim were totally cool, and then it cuts to Kim and she's like fuming, and then it cuts back to him.
Yeah.
Or like when Ramona Flowers is like, what about you and Knives? He's like, oh, me and Knives, we had a great breakup, it was fine.
Yeah.
And you could hear Knives in the background go, oh man.
Yeah.
Like little moments like that make it so funny, and it makes it hold up so much that it's one of those movies that still is absolutely hysterical, and surprisingly not a lot of movies have done quite to the same extent. You know what I mean? Like Shaun of the Dead, like you said, has a bunch of other ones that inspired other ones. Hot Fuzz is like a parody of other movies that inspire other ones. But this one didn't. I don't know. I don't think there's another movie that you can really say has that same vibe as a Scott Pilgrim and does it well, right?
Yeah. Again, this definitely is a movie that took a lot from its comic book predecessor.
Yeah.
So there wasn't like a lot of like wiggle room, I guess, for kind of readapting its style. But I think we kind of see some of the influences, whether that be in something like Deadpool, for example, not outright, but something where it's like, oh, there's characters breaking the fourth wall.
As far as self-awareness.
Yeah, self-awareness,
exactly.
point, yeah. And I think, well, it's funny, like thinking about like more of like the social impacts of this movie. This movie kind of addresses a lot of like LBGT, questions and whatnot. Whether that be like Scott's roommate being gay, and they share the same bed, or is Ramona having a lesbian ex-girlfriend. So I mean, I don't know. What's kind of your thoughts on like
it's very interesting because it does it, but it does it in a way that it's very like, oh yeah, this is so normal. It does it in a way that it's just like, oh yeah, I have a roommate who's gay is totally not weird at all. Like it doesn't. Obviously, it points it out, and it points it out in very comedic ways, but I don't think it does it in a way where it's like looking down on LGBT. I feel like it does it in a way that it's more like very like self-aware, like haha, I'm gay and I'm okay with laughing about it kind of thing, where that kind of whole concept playing around with it. I think it's interesting about the Ramona X, because it's 7 evil exes, not ex-boyfriends.
Yeah.
Because he keeps saying ex-boyfriends, and she's like, no, exes, and then obviously the ex-girlfriend comes out.
Right.
And I think that was interesting. That definitely it's definitely not played in a way, I feel though, where anyone who, how do I say this, like, I don't want to say it's like a straight white guy's fantasy, but it kind of is like a straight guy's fantasy as far as like two girls going at it, and it's like, oh, those girls are like totally lesbo, bro.
Yeah.
That kind of concept where it's specifically that scene. I don't think it's poorly handled, but I just don't think it's like, I think it's very stereotypical in that sense, where it's like, oh, we've seen like this is a guy's fantasy or something.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the big things with this movie is kind of the whole idea of fantasy, male gaze.
And kind of male stereotypicalness too, because Scott Pilgrim is a dick. I can't lie. He kind of is a dick in this movie, at least. He's a little bit. I mean, at least with knives and with like the way he talks about.
Well,
like,
just the fact that he's dating a 17-year-old.
The fact that he's dating a 17. The fact that he like dumps her because he finds another girl hotter, and he's like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's very much like. Yeah, I think there's a little bit to that for sure.
Yeah, and the whole thing of you're talking about Ramona fighting her ex-girlfriend, because that's really the only way you could fight. You could fight back, another girl, because they don't want to have guys hit. Girls, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Except for Knives, who gets punched.
Yeah, Knives, but then Knives ends up joining in the fight later on in the story too. Yeah. But I mean, it's just kind of weird that they pin. That they're almost forcing Ramona to kind of answer for her past, with having like lesbian, like trying and experiencing like those kind of feelings, but she's has to answer it, like, and you know, she keeps saying, "Oh, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about it," but it literally gets to a point where Scott can't fight her, like Ramona has to.
Yeah.
And doesn't she end up getting like defeated, like, because she like touched
the back of her knee?
Yeah. So that was really strange.
Yeah.
But they have a little other moments like that too, like the whole like I'm in lesbians with you, stuff in there too. So I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying it's like in a negative way.
I don't think it's a negative way.
Yeah, I think it's a very like fun, like kind of funny way. It's kind of like playing it as a joke. Like,
there's the scene where she first comes out, her ex-girlfriend, where she's like, I mean, it was just a face. I mean, I was a little bi-curious, and then she's like, I'm gonna show you bi-furious, and then she does the uppercut punch or whatever, where it's like she's kind of playing it off. It's just like whatever, like that's not really who I am, kind of thing.
Yeah. But no, I mean it's all played for laughs, and I think that's really funny. But yeah, the all of the evil exes all kind of represent, like in their own way, kind of a different level of
maturity.
Yeah, where we see or lack of maturity, I should say, because we see like. The ex-girlfriend not being acceptive of her choice to move on. We see Chris Evans, who's like this egotistical like movie star who doesn't want anything to do with them, but he was more dating Ramona for his own self encouragement, self insecurity. The main ex boyfriend who comes out, who's like the main villain at the end, Gillian. It's like he refuses to. Like, all of them refuse to move on from Ramona, but him specifically wants to control Ramona and have her under, like, his spell, like, and mind controller, which is, like, is this, it's kind of going back to, like, the commentary on the male gaze and the male fantasization. Is that just another layer of that? Is that where the line toes? Where is that where this is taking it too far? I mean, I don't know. Interesting conversation.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's taking it too far for sure, but I definitely do feel.
No, I mean, in the sense that the bad guy is the one who wants to mind control Ramona, who wants to have total control over a woman he cares about. You know what I mean?
Okay,
like he's the one who takes it to a new extreme.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
And that's why he's villainized for it.
Got it.
And of course, this movie also brings up the question of self-respect over love. Do you need to love yourself before you're capable of truly loving somebody else? And I think that's where ultimately we come to the discovery of, like, he's been jerking around Ramona and Knives because he doesn't have enough respect for himself. So that's ultimately what he has to gain at the end of the story. Yeah,
it's the whole concept. It also plays into maturity.
Yeah.
Like, it plays into the concept of, like, growing up or not growing up, or you're still acting childish, whether you're a child or not, kind of whole thing. Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of interesting things that comes up in there.
Yeah, that's why I think it's like a perfect like coming of age story. Like, it plays a lot into that genre. I think is really effective in it.
That's a very good point. Yeah, cool. Yeah, Scott Pilgrim's a great film, and it's one that obviously will live in as far as one of the funniest Edgar Wright films, and kind of the one that made him, even though it didn't make a lot of money, made him into like a even bigger star than he already was. And from there, we get into his other film, which is The World's End, and this is one that is kind of regarded as not as good movie. I don't want to say it's his bad movie, but it's his not as good movie, where a lot of people didn't appreciate this one as much as the other ones. And this is kind of the finale of the Cornetto trilogy, I believe. Another one with Simon Pegg and Nick Frost, and basically, essentially, it's the whole like buddies coming together after a very long time. I don't know how long it's been, but it's been like a super long time.
Right.
And their plan is to like go to like 12 pubs in one night and like have a drink with old friends, and kind of catching up from the good old times from when they were younger. Now when they're older and they're much more, not everyone is still like into drinking and into having fun.
Right,
and some of them are much more proper and like pristine and like kind of pretentious and snobby and being like, I don't want to go drinking with my buddies. I want to be, I'm much more proper than that. I have a family now. I'm much more pristine. And that's kind of the whole concept. And it turns into like a apocalypse, invasion film where the world's ending and all that stuff going on. But it still has some really funny moments. It still has that incredible editing.
Yeah.
It's just regarded as one of those movies that didn't hit as much as his other ones, for sure. I know obviously there's probably a lot of people who love this movie quite a bit, but this is one for me that I was like, if I had to rank them, this one would probably be near my bottom What do you think about At the World's End or The World's End?
Or The World's End, yeah. At World's End, is that the Pirates of the Caribbean? Yeah.
It is.
There's a lot of World's End
There really
titles.
is. There surprisingly is.
Yeah. But no, this is definitely like Edgar Wright's like sci-fi movie, a science fiction piece, you know, alien invasion as they're doing like this pub crawl. I mean, it's pretty highly regarded, I think, still. You know, it has like a high rating on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah.
Pretty high IMDb score, I think, too. But it just wasn't one that I connected with personally. It wasn't as fluent and as, I think I should say, like relevant as I think Hot Fuzz was and Shaun of the Dead is. But it's still an enjoyable picture. But I didn't really rewatch it because it's a little you know, it's more of the same that we see in the other Edgar Wright films, but a little bit different with the whole alien invasion twist to it. But to me, it's just like it's treading a lot of the same territory Shaun of the Dead was.
Yeah.
In terms of like people becoming being trapped in these pubs and trying to make it all the way towards the end. But it's a really enjoyable movie. A lot of great, you know, visual comedy, which is a consistent theme with Edgar Wright. You know, we kind of mentioned, you know, the whole thing with his buddy not drinking, which is really funny. And it's kind of, in general, just the whole idea of people coming home to their hometown after being away for a long time and feeling alienated, feeling alone, isolated. And how is that metaphor, you know, taken to the extreme is that there's a little alien invasion and they're forced to be stuck together and fighting against this kind of evil. So
yeah, and it's also similar to like Hot Fuzz as far as like the townspeople have something deeper and more sinister in mind, or them being a part of the alien invasion or whatever. And this one also has, I gotta give a shout out to like Martin Freeman, because Martin Freeman does a small little cameo in Shaun of the Dead where if you blink you miss it. I don't know if you knew that, but Martin Freeman's in the first one as like Shaun's friend's boyfriend.
Oh yeah,
he does this little thing where it's actually a really funny moment where they're all saying hi to each other, and going through the fence or whatever.
Right.
But Martin Freeman plays a bigger role in this movie as well, and obviously Simon Pegg still delivers the laughs in this movie, and it's still super funny. I can't lie, there's one edit or hip hop edit in this movie.
Yeah.
Where it's literally me at every situation, where it's like beer, water, and all his friends are like beer, water, and then you see the cops, it's like beer, and then the guy's like water, and I'm like, that's me right there. That is all me. It's like everyone's drinking, hey, and I'm like, hey, I got my water, bro. But that thing is like the best description of me you'll ever get in any kind of social situation.
Yeah.
Because I do go to social situations where I do have a giant cup of water, or water in some sense, where it's just something that I'm always going to drink, and that's pretty much it as far as what I'm going to drink. And I think that's funny, and I think that actually plays well for laughs, for sure.
Yeah.
But this is another one of those, like I said before, where the pub or the drinking is a part of the camaraderie, part of the getting together, and if you don't do it, you're an idiot or something kind of like that.
Right.
Where it's like, really, man, you're not going to drink with us? What's your problem? Or like that fascination or that adoration that Edgar Wright has with the concept of a pub and the concept of drinking, where it's a very British kind of get-together kind of thing where everyone after work goes out for a drink or something like that, like almost every night or something like that, where it's very much the concept of like friendship or getting together. It's going out for a drink.
Yeah, and again, he's so good at creating like these friendships that you really believe and trust in. You know, we see that, like we said, with Hot Fuzz and with Shaun of the Dead, but this one is like all 7 of these guys, all 4, I don't know, 4 or 7, all these guys basically are just really close friends, and they're all able to connect through like their childhood experiences and memories, and they're able to reuse a lot of that stuff. And by the way, I always like in the Edgar Wright films, and they do it in here, and they do it in the other Canelo trilogy movies, is that they'll tell you the whole the whole movie within like the first like 5 minutes or whatever. And I think that was like really good. Really really cool here. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move on to his final film, or the film that is most recent, and the one that just came out on Blu-ray, which you should check out.
Yeah.
And this is one that came out over the summer that a lot of people were talking about because it's another Edgar Wright film, and this is one that he was pushing to be like a commercial success, because most of these movies that we've talked about today didn't do amazing numbers at the box office. I know at The World's End did pretty well, but it didn't do like crazy, ridiculous like numbers that most filmmakers would want them to do.
Right.
Because Edgar Wright makes very specific movies, and I feel like
they're niche.
Whereas this movie, which is Baby Driver, is his most commercial, most everyone can kind of, every general movie-going audience can get something out of it, and that's obviously Baby Driver. And it's one movie that he really pushes the whole concept of a musical, kind of, and making like a choreographed heist movie, where it's pretty much the entire movie has music playing in every single scene, which to me is fascinating because
35 songs, 35 tracks.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where it's like pretty much in every scene there's a song playing, and that's, to me, it sounds like it'll drive you insane, but he plays it and he does it so well that you at some moments you don't notice it, at other moments you notice it, in other moments it's much more subdued.
Right.
It's absolutely fascinating movie. It's an absolutely well-directed movie, and it's one that got a lot of hype and a lot of buzz. And I know it's one that we talked about quite a bit because we had that whole Comic-Con drive.
Yeah,
and me, you, and Brian talked about this one forever.
Yeah, we did.
Because it's very, I don't want to say it's light in plot, but it kind of is light in plot. It's the most simple plot that you can possibly do for an Edgar Wright film, and it's also the most easily to swallow Edgar Wright film.
Yeah, it's very accessible.
It's very accessible is a better way to say it, right? Because it's not one of those films like Shaun of the Dead, where it's like if my mom saw Shaun of the Dead, she would not get it, she would not like it. If my mom saw Hot Fuzz, she would not get it, she would not like it. If my mom saw Baby Driver, she'd dig the crap out of it. She'd think it's awesome because it's a much more accessible, not just for cinephiles, not just for genre movie lovers, but for everyone kind of movie. What do you think of this movie? Because I know we had a lot of thoughts on it.
Yeah, I mean, I gotta be transparent about it off the front. I saw this movie and we talked about it a little bit. I appreciate a lot of what he was going for. The whole idea of the musical action, it's kind of like La La Land meets Drive. That's kind of what a lot of people compare it to, and I agree to some sense. And it was really nice how he was able to, match like the action and the gunshots and the car chases with the music. I thought it was really interesting and inventive. That being said, I'm not the biggest fan of this movie. To me, it's probably like my least favorite Edgar Wright film. Just because it's the least like his other films. This is the least like this. It follows like his style to the least. Like you said, it's more accessible. A lot of people could get it more. And it's another example of genre bending, right? You're combining two genres like actions and musicals that wouldn't never go together, and he makes it work really well. But that being said, is very much evocative of like the 70s and 80s car movies that we'll see, like Bullet or like anything like Steve McQueen were doing like that involved cars, or stuff like The French Connection or other big like car heavy movies that he's kind of repurposing into this film. So as a result, we do get a very simple plot, we do get a very simple story, and we get kind of simple characters, which I enjoy a lot of Wright's films for being so out there and new and fresh and original. This one didn't really do a lot of that for me, even though I do commend it for doing something completely inventive and new with the storytelling aspect of it. So.
Okay, yeah, I totally get that. I absolutely understand that. I don't know, I kind of feel like the side characters are, they're fun. They're very fun. Like the Jamie Foxx character, the John Hamm character.
Yeah.
John Bernthal is in it for a short moment. I think they kind of they have those moments that are just really fun. I do get that it's a little bit thinner on the side of the plot, but the musical aspect of it, the incorporation of syncing up the music to the action, to the scenes, to the emotions of the scenes is kind of the selling point of this movie. It's the thing that makes people want to go see it. It's like, go check out this movie because the way it incorporates music is unlike anything you've seen before, kind of thing. And it really is. Like, it really is original in that sense, where it's like, it's a lot of fun to see some really cool songs incorporated into a really cool action sequence.
Right. And, you know, the whole movie was kind of inspired by this 2011 music video for that Edgar Wright directed for this song called Blue Song from Mint Royale. And that whole setup was that there's this getaway driver sitting in the car listening to some tunes, and while the bank robbery was happening, he was just listening to the music. And once the bank robbery stopped or ended, you know, he'll come back and continue to play music as he's driving. And that was the genesis of what Baby Driver ultimately became, right? Like, it was like Edgar Wright he even wanted to go as far as just have that music video be the opening sequence.
And it kind of was.
Yeah, he repurposed it with new, you know, obviously with new actors, and the DP Bill Pope, who did the cinematography for this, by the way, has some really interesting ways of getting the camera around, like through the car, navigating the camera inside of the car and out of the car. So it was really great. I also enjoy like the whole opening thing where he's like walking down the street and listening to music. And
it's
like
really
the little lyrics in the background. Like, so that's really nice.
I like one of my favorites is the Tequila with Jamie Foxx.
Right.
Tequila,
Yeah.
and then he's like the guns are going off at the same beats and stuff.
Yeah,
I think that was kind of cool. I thought that was one of my favorite scenes for sure.
Yeah, and with having and it's funny because having the beat of that song be so like weird and because this is not even like the original song, right? It's like a cover.
Yeah.
So it's like having the beat be so weird and off that they have to choreograph the gunfights to make sure that the actors are shooting them on the beat of the rhythm of the thing. It's just really fascinating. So
yeah, for sure. Something I want to bring up about Baby Driver, and I feel that it pertains to all of Edgar Wright's films. It's a critique that I heard a while back when I was on Facebook and on Twitter, and it's the one I heard it from was from a girl named Gabby Dunn, who is a YouTuber that I know, and she's actually a friend of Josh McCouga's. I don't know if you know this. Yeah, she is. She was on a episode of the Josh McCouga show a while back, but she's a well-known YouTuber, and she made a interesting point that when you hear it first, you're like, come on, really? But then when you hear it and when she really breaks it down on Twitter, she makes really good points, and that is the female characters of Edgar Wright's movies are kind of nothing. Yeah. They're like Lily James in this movie is really just there to be Baby Driver's or Baby's like love interest and just be like, she literally shows up at the diner and is like, "What's your name? You're really hot." And I'm like, she doesn't say that, but she basically says that where she's like, "What are you listening to? Oh my God, you're cat. Let me go on a date with you." And she's like the most basic girl, and you're like, what's your purpose? You're gonna run away with this guy who just like
he just
shoots up banks and drives away? Like, and she made a good point as far as saying like she was a nothing character, just the most transparent love interest you'll ever meet, and the most like 1950s lady who falls in love with a hot guy kind of thing. And looking back at it, it kind of made me want to question all the other Edgar Wright female characters. And honestly, they're all kind of pretty empty as far as Lizzie or Liz in Shaun of the Dead. As far as, I mean, freaking Knives in Scott Pilgrim versus the World. Ramona Flowers is just a love interest character and kind of almost this weird possession that he wants to have. Pretty much all of the female characters in Edgar Wright's films are kind of empty. And it's crazy because some of the biggest fans I know, Edgar Wright fans, are females. Like, girls love Edgar Wright movies, and I'm not just being stereotypical. I'm being like he reaches both male and female audiences, at least what I've heard or what I've seen. But at the same time, his female characters are kind of empty. I don't know. What do you think about this?
No, I mean, I 100% agree, at least with Baby Driver. And that was one. I mean, I was gonna. You know, when I started mentioning the critiques of that movie, like why I really didn't enjoy it myself, that was one of the biggest ones. It's like she was like literally a two-dimensional thing. But again, I think Edgar Wright was trying to invoke like the 50s, 60s, 70s car movies.
That's my excuse for it too, is the fact that he is trying to invoke that old-timey feel, and that's why she got an old-timey girl as far as that as well.
Yeah, but I mean, that being said, I can really look past that when I was watching it. It's something that's very noticeable, especially in that movie. With Scott Pilgrim, though, I will say, like, I think the female characters do have some more to do.
Okay.
They do have an arc. I mean, Knives has the whole realization that dating Scott isn't a good idea to begin with. Dating somebody who's way older than her, or whatever. And with Ramona having to come to terms with a lot of the decisions she had to make in the past. I mean, there's a way to interpret that.
Sure, but we're still getting the male POV. We're still getting the male perspective.
And there's not like a female lead in the Edgar Wright film.
No, there isn't. And to be honest, I just don't feel like they incorporate as much into the story as much as would for a basic movie. Like, to be honest, you can see female characters who have a much smaller screen time and have way more of an impact in other films than in Edgar Wright films.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things that he hasn't really written a well-rounded female character as much as other filmmakers have, and pretty much any of his movies. And I just feel like it's one of those things that a lot of people might overlook, which is, it's fair to overlook because it's something that's not pointed out, but it's also fair to criticize because it's something that you really have to take a look at and be like, wait a minute, maybe that's a good point. Maybe I should incorporate female characters a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, even in Hot Fuzz, there aren't really a lot of female characters in that. And the ones that are in the police department are at least like have to deal with like men constantly like flirting with her or whatever, saying a bunch of weird stuff. But I mean, I guess that's really, is it more of a side effect of Edgar Wright's storytelling, or is it just the POV of the character that he wants you to get behind, right? Like, all of his characters are not like misogynist or whatever, but all of his characters have a very specific place where they're looking at like their relationships with women. Going back to Shaun of the Dead, he really wants to get back with his ex-girlfriend Liz. So what does he do? He steps up to the plate, tries to become a leader, tries to show her that what he's capable of.
Yeah, but you can also make an argument that his ex-girlfriend Liz is someone who is asking for something so simple and something so it's something that's very reasonable in a relationship where it's like, hey, don't be a bum slacker. And the framing of it in the movie is very much like, look at this nagging girlfriend, doesn't let me hang out with my buddy and play video games all day. Like, it kind of frames it that way, at least in the beginning of the film, with Ed and with Shaun, as far as being that in that way where it's like, she's more of the nagging girlfriend than she is a reasonable, character.
Right.
Or three-dimensional character.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree, with that as well. I just think that, especially with Baby Driver, having a little more behind her story, her motivation would be helpful. I mean, we get a little bit of her backstory, but we just understand she lives on her own. Like, and there's just more. It's like her backstory almost is there to constitute more reason why she should run away with him, right? Like, she doesn't have anywhere else to go in her own life.
But it also felt like, at least watching the movie for me, it did feel like, hey, run away with me to Mexico. And you're like, she's like, let's do it, baby.
Yeah.
And you're like, why?
Yeah, no, that's
you went on one date with this guy,
Yeah.
and you just barely know him, and now he's like a bank robber, and you want to run away with him? This guy's gonna put this girl's life at risk.
And she waits for him afterwards.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's definitely like, it's definitely like you have to get on. It's like the women characters in these movies are like, you get on board with the dude. It's not really the other way around.
It's more the guy side where it's like, I have this girl who's like waiting for me because she's in love with me and because I'm really cool.
Or like Michael Cera has two girls fighting over him.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, I don't think, no offense to Michael Cera, but I don't think this dude would really have two women.
Nah, bro. I mean, I'm sure two women, sure, but not Knives and Ramona Flowers.
Yeah.
Not Mary Elizabeth Winstead.
Yeah. So it's but it is.
It really is kind of a male fantasy kind of thing in Edgar Wright's movies. If you think about it, think about Shaun of the Dead, think about Scott Pilgrim, think about Baby Driver. Right? I mean, I'm not stretching it too far, am I? Because I feel like there is kind of like a male, like kind of down on his luck, average-looking dude, getting the girl. Whether it's Baby, whether it's Simon Pegg, or whether it's Scott Pilgrim or Michael Cera, they're all kind of average, white, straight, regular-looking dudes.
Yeah.
Not any kind of like, something to something more to their character than that, as far as like for appealing to women goes.
Right.
It's just like, hey, I'm a regular ass dude who can get the hot girl. Right? I don't know. I think that's a fair criticism to say as far as his movies go. And I feel like that's something that's specifically pointed out in Baby Driver that is very much a good point. But I would explain it by saying it's a throwback to that era. That's kind of why she's so... Even the ending of the film where it's like she's dressed in like that kind of 1950s outfit and he's kind of in that 1950s outfit with that old-timey convertible car. Remember, you know what I'm talking about, right?
Right.
Where he comes out of the jail and then she's kind of has... And it's kind of that old school throwback kind of movie where the female characters are supposed to be that. And I got that for sure. I'm sure that's what he was going for in that movie.
Yeah. But what I will commend the movie on is use of having actors like Kevin Spacey, Jamie Foxx, like you said, John Barenthal, John Hamm, particularly with Jamie Foxx though. I mean, for me, like I saw what they were doing a lot with the opening stuff, and I enjoyed it, but I was never really on board on it. But once like a character like Jamie Foxx comes into play, who is so dangerous, who is such a wild card, who is so unpredictable that to a point you're just like, oh shoot, like this is where the stakes of the movie really start to ramp up. And you know, they established pretty early on that if he wants something, he's not going to pay for it. He's not going to get it. He's going to kill somebody to get it, right? So when he goes into, we have that whole diner scene with Jamie Foxx and John Hamm and the girlfriend. I keep forgetting the girlfriend's name. I can't remember.
I can't remember her name either, but she's Latina, so shout out to her.
And where
Lily James.
Lily James and you know, comes up to serve him. Debbie is her name. She comes up to serve him, and you know the Bats is gonna kill her, but it's the suspense of seeing how Baby's gonna react to that. You know, and Baby has to act like he doesn't know her, and like kind of blows her off just, you know, to keep her safe. So I think that was, you know, I think the Jamie Foxx element of this movie was probably the strongest part to me, at least. Like,
it's probably the best part of the movie in my opinion. I love it. I love him in the shootout scene. I love him in that diner scene. He's great in this movie, and I really do feel like having that John Hamm relationship with his wife as well and kind of threatening that relationship. I love seeing that too, because it's that two badasses going at each other with John Hamm and with Jamie Foxx. And also the whole concept of the movie of as far as being like, how much of a criminal are you a criminal? Can you be a criminal if you're supporting the people who kill, or do you have to kill yourself to be a full criminal? I thought that's kind of interesting as well, as far as like how Baby never actually picked up a gun and shot someone in the face, but he might as well have, as far as letting people do it and letting people get away with it, as far as a bank robbery.
Right, exactly.
And being the getaway driver, and he still gets punished for it at the end. I kind of like that he got punished for it. I like that he came out of prison and was like, yep, I had to do my time in prison because guess what? I'm just as much of a criminal as John Hamm and as Jamie Foxx is. Even though I didn't pick up a gun and shoot up a bank, I pretty much let them do it. It's kind of the whole concept. And he always felt bad about it. But it doesn't matter if you feel bad, dude. You still let it happen. So you still have to pay with time. And I thought that was interesting as far as like paying with time and then coming back full circle. I don't know what you think of the ending as far as him going to prison for what he did.
I mean, I definitely see where they're going. I think that's definitely one of the bigger Edgar Wright isms that we see in this movie is subverting the genre, right? Like in any other like action heist movie, the main character is getting away and the girlfriend skating off and driving into the sunset.
That's exactly it.
In this movie, it's like, oh no, he gets caught. He actually, you know, he could have driven away. He could have found a way out of it. And we know that because he's found his way out of worse situations. But it's just finally time for him to own up to the crime, own up to the punishment, and take what he deserved. Because like you said, even though you're not directly shooting people in the face, and even though you're not inflicting pain on people, you might as well have. You know, you're an associate in these crimes. You're the getaway driver. You're the guy who's responsible for getting these people to and from these places. So you're just kind of content with what's happening. The ending was a nice little subversion. I know for a lot of people that kind of threw them off the movie a little bit, at least to the people who I talked to.
It threw me off, but I liked it. I was like, whoa, this is weird. But then I was like, oh, I get it. It's different.
Yeah. No, but like you said, it's different, and it's nice to finally see a character who has to own up to the consequences that instilled before. By the way, with that Jamie Foxx character one more time, like with that whole the thing where he like smokes the cigarette. You know, that's improv.
It was improv.
Yeah, they came up with that on set.
Yeah.
Which I think is really nice. And you know, mentioning going back to the music, being such an integral part of it, having the scenes where Baby has to literally stop the music just to make sure the timing is just right.
Yeah.
It's so funny and so like interesting that they're finding a creative way to like stretch out these songs and these moments and have it to where you totally understand where Baby's coming from.
And also to a shout out to Edgar Wright and Ansel Elgort.
Mm-hmm.
The song, what's that song that his mom sings? Something Sunday Morning?
Yeah.
That song was actually Ansel's recommendation to Edgar. That wasn't
really?
a song that he had. So Edgar asked Ansel, what's a song that you know like really, really well, In and Out? And Ansel said that song, like the Sunday Morning song or whatever. And he said, all right, now I want you to do like, you just came back from doing this and this song plays, how would you react to it? And he played that song that Ansel apparently like recommended as far as like, this is a song that I'm really comfortable with. So it's Edgar Wright kind of working well with his actors that I thought was really cool.
Yeah. And the whole thing of him like recording conversations and making them into little records himself was nice.
That was hysterical.
You know, I kind of you know, in the sense of Baby Driver or Baby having to listen to music like whenever he goes, I'm one of those kind of cats. Like I always have to have headphones in no matter where I'm at, just because I like listening and stuff. But no, I think Baby, again, I said it before, it's not my favorite Edgar Wright movie. It's probably my least favorite, just because it departs so far from like the comedy aspects of it
pushing the envelope
of the comedy, exactly, that we're used to seeing Edgar Wright doing. Is definitely more commercial, more accessible, but I do commend it for doing something new and inventive with his filmmaking and you know, taking the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s Cars movies and, you know, repurposing them to a new generation, even if that means we get kind of a simplistic story, even if that means the everything's kind of
surface
level, exactly. That's what I was looking for.
But at the same time, it's still genre bending. It's still fun editing, and it's still really, really freakingly well directed and well edited. I love Baby Driver. That's kind of my last thing on it. Any last thing you want to say before we peace out?
Nah, I mean, that's really it.
Yeah, guys. Well, thank you again for coming into the Meaning of Podcast, guys. That was our conversation on Edgar Wright. Let us know what you guys thought. What is your favorite Edgar Wright movie? What do you think of Baby Driver? What do you think of him as far as a filmmaker? Please let us know, because we will be reading your comments, whether it be in Schmoville, whether it be in the YouTube comment section. Make sure you check it out, share it, like it, do all that jazz. We're going to be here all the time on the Meaning of Podcast talking about your favorite filmmakers. I'm Ace, this is RB3, and we are officially peacing out.
Whoop.